Good morning. My name is Johan Las and I am the leader of Group 1. My members are Brandon Baula, Carl Bowers, Hannah Agunos, Angela Caballero, Elijah Del Mundo, Francine Ilagan, Maricol Del Valle, Rodrin Manalo, and Ethan Noiles. And our report is about Franz Joseph Haydn. Franz Joseph Haydn was born on March 31, 1732, in Rorau, Austria. He was an Austrian composer who was one of the most important figures in the development of the classical style in music during the 18th century. He helped establish the forms and styles for the string quartet and the symphony.
Haydn was also known as the father of symphony because of the extraordinary work he did in developing the musical form of the symphony, and perhaps even more significantly for his work in developing the musical ensemble that came to be known as a symphony orchestra. Haydn is also called the father of the string quartet because of his important contribution to the musical form.
Franz Joseph Haydn was born in Roharo, Austria, a small village near the border of Austria and Hungary. As a boy, his talent for music was apparent, but his parents did not have enough money to provide him with music lessons, or even any sort of education. There were, of course, no public schools in the 18th century Europe, so if a child from a poor family showed talent or intellectual promise, it was not uncommon for the parents to give the child over to a guardian who had the resources to help the child obtain an education. This is what happened to Haydn.
Haydn was the second son of humble parents. His father was a wheelwright. His mother, before marriage, a cook for the lords of the village. Haydn early revealed unusual musical gifts, and a cousin who was a school principal and a choir master in the nearby city of Hamburg offered to take him into his home and train him.
Haydn's parents realized that there was no opportunity for their son to become educated in their tiny village. When he was 6 years old, they gave him to a choir master named Johann Matthias Frank, who took the young boy to the town of Heinberg, 7 miles away, for the next 2 years. Haydn was trained there as a boy soprano and sang as a soloist and in a church choir from the age of 6 on. Haydn never returned to live with his family but would occasionally visit them.
The young Haydn sang in the church choir, learned to play various instruments, and obtained a good basic knowledge of music. But his life changed decisively when he was 8 years old. The musical director of St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna had observed the boy on a visit to Hainburg and invited him to serve as a chorister at the Austrian capital's most important church. Haydn's parents accepted the offer and thus, in 1740, Haydn moved to Vienna. He stayed at the choir school for 9 years, acquiring an enormous practical knowledge of music by constant performances, but to his disappointment, receiving little instruction in music theory, he had to work hard to fulfill his obligations as a chorister. And when his voice changed, he was expelled from both the cathedral choir and choir school.
With no money and few possessions, Haydn at 17 was left to his own devices. He found refuge for a while in the garret of a fellow musician and supported himself miserably with odd musical jobs. He meanwhile undertook an arduous course of self-instruction through the study of musical works, notably those of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and of leading manuals of musical theory. A fortunate chance brought him to the attention of the Italian composer and singing teacher Nicola Porpora, who accepted him as accompanist for voice lessons and corrected Haydn's composition.
So, what is Joseph Haydn famous for? Well, Haydn was an extremely prolific composer, and some of his well-known works include the London Symphonies, the Creation, Trumpet Concerto, and Cello Concerto, number 2 in D major. His compositions are often characterized as light, witty, and elegant.
If you were to ask what is Franz Joseph Haydn's greatest contribution to music during the classical period, he was groundbreaking in the classical period for his contributions to the form of symphony, the string quartet, piano trio, and the sotana allegro form. Haydn was a busy composer. He spent most of his career working for his Esterhazy family, which allowed him to develop his skills and musical video.
He did work for Esterhazy family for 30 years. During the 30 year that he did work for Esterhazy court, he produced a flood of composition and musical style continued to develop. Prince Nicholas Esterhazy, Haydn's most important patron.
By the end of 1803, Haydn's condition had declined to the point that he became physically unable to compose. He suffered from weakness, dizziness, inability to concentrate, and painfully swollen legs. Since diagnosis was uncertain in Haydn's time, it is unlikely that the precise illness can ever be identified. Though Jones suggests arteriosclerosis, the illness was especially hard for Haydn because of the flow of fresh musical ideas continued unabated, although he could no longer work them out as compositions. Franz Joseph Haydn's music is the development of larger structures out of very short, simple musical motifs, often derived from standard accompanying figures. The music is often quite formally concentrated, and the important musical events of movement can unfold rather quickly.
Haydn's work was central to the development of what came to be called sonata form. His practice, however, differed in some ways from that of Mozart and Beethoven, his younger contemporaries who likewise excelled in this form of composition. Haydn was particularly fond of the so-called monothematic exposition, in which the music that establishes the dominant key is similar or identical to the opening theme. Haydn also differs from Mozart and Beethoven in his recapitulation sections, where he often rearranged the order of themes compared to the exposition and uses extensive thematic development.
Haydn's formal inventiveness also led him to integrate the fog into classical style and to enrich rondo form with more cohesive tonal logic. Haydn was also the principal exponent of the double variation form, variations on two alternating themes, which are often major and minor mode versions of each other.
Perhaps more than any other composers, Haydn's music is known for its humor. The most famous example is the sudden loud chord in the slow movement of his Surprise Symphony. Haydn's many other musical jokes include numerous false endings.
To sum it all up, Franz Joseph Haydn was a pretty well-known composer during the classical periods. Through his childhood, he experienced being poor and his parents couldn't afford to pay his tuition bills. So he and his parents decided that they should give their child to Johann Matthias Frank, who was a choir master that time. He got to study in a choir school but got kicked out when his voice changed because of puberty. He made his way to the top with the help of his mentors and teachers, and he played for the Esterhazy, which gave him an opportunity to play more, and because of that, he got famous outside the royal place and started to share his music to the world. Franz Joseph Haydn is really an inspiring person despite all his hardships and sacrifices. The success he dreamt became a reality. And that is the end of our presentation. Again, we are Group 1, and thank you for listening.